Cynthia Latich Davis, and we get together here on Sunday nights to meet everyday Orthodox Christians. You know, I think it's just a great opportunity for us to get together and get to know the members of the body of Christ. We can build community through conversation, get to know one another. You know, here in North America, Orthodoxy is very fragmented. We're all divided up, right? We've got all these different jurisdictions. We don't necessarily know each other between the jurisdictions. We don't know each other between these regions on this huge continent. We're so spread out. So I think it's a beautiful thing to just, you know, sit down for a little while and ask somebody who they are, what their life has been like, what their story is. I think it's always interesting. And, you know, I think really Orthodox people are pretty fascinating. We have a lot of immigrants. We have kids who grew up in families of immigrants, or not kids anymore necessarily, right? But we also have a lot of converts. And so everybody comes from different places. We have a lot of colorful and very interesting stories. So I always get excited every Sunday night to come and find out who's the next one, right? What's the next story going to be? So thank you for joining us. Welcome. I do want to remind you, of course, that we are streaming live on ancientfaith.com. We're on the AFR app. We're on AFM's Facebook Live page, and we're also on YouTube, which is the Ancient Faith Ministries channel on YouTube. We are live when we're live, right? But then we also archive the episodes. So if you ever miss one, you know, you can always listen later when you're going for a jog or cleaning your bathroom or whatever you're doing. Just go find some old episodes and get to know some new people. So, all right, without any further ado, I want to tell you about tonight's guest. Tonight we have Kendra Hunter on the show. Now, she was chrismated and married about 20 years ago in the Orthodox Church. That was the start of her journey as an Orthodox Christian. She is a wife, and she eventually became a homeschooling mother, actually. She has 4 children from 10 to 17. But in addition to that, she also owns and operates a successful business in her home. So she's very passionate about helping people, including her own family, just accept who they are and learn how to be gracious with others. And she actually wonderfully is a part of the program, part of the team who put together Parenting Toward the Kingdom. Now, if you remember, Parenting Toward the Kingdom was a book by Dr. Philip Mamalakis. If you don't have it, you should get it because it's very good. But now there's also a companion guide to go with the book. And we'll ask Kendra a little bit about that and how that looks. But she was on the team that put that together. And it's a wonderful book for parents, for Orthodox Christian parents. And all right, well, I don't want to say anything more about the book because I'm going to let Kendra say it. So we'll leave that alone. Kendra, welcome to the program.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
Well, thank you for being on the show. I'm excited. You were supposed to be on the show this summer, and you showed up, and I showed up, and Matushka Trudy was here, and we all did our part, and yet the internet failed us, and the entire station went offline, and there was no show. So thank you for coming back again, for trusting us with another hour of your life. So thank you very much. So Kendra, tell me, where does your life story start? Where were you born?
Sure. I was born in a small town in Ohio called Piqua, Ohio, but Sydney, Ohio was the town where I actually lived, but Piqua was where the hospital was, right up the road. And about 3rd grade, we moved to Mason, Ohio, which is close to Cincinnati. And that's really what I consider where I grew up, in kind of my hometown. But I graduated from Mason High School and went to college at Capital University in Columbus, Ohio. It's a Lutheran college there. I actually grew up Lutheran in the ELCA church. And then after college, I went to Chicago and went to University of Chicago and went to the divinity school there. And that's where I met my husband. Yeah, so I got a Master's of Arts in Religious Studies, thinking at the time that I wanted to do a PhD in religion and literature. But God had different plans for me. And, you know, after my master's degree, I just was in a place where I had a lot of energy, and the thought of being in a library, you know, writing papers, reading books over the next decade, just, I wasn't there. You know, I didn't feel like that's where my gifts were calling me. So I actually was a 3-time All-American basketball player at Capital. And then I started coaching at University of Chicago as a graduate assistant. And so after I finished my degree there, I got a job as the assistant women's basketball coach out at North Central College in Naperville, Illinois.
That's amazing. Like,
yeah,
thank you. I mean, that's really neat, but it's also just such different I just picture a theology graduate student as being one person and a women's basketball coach as being completely a different person. And here they are, both rolled up in you. That's amazing.
Yes. Yeah, I have a lot of different parts.
Yeah, that's cool though. I like that. I like that you sort of indulged all the different parts, you know, that you didn't have to pick one. And I like that you changed gears in there as well, because sometimes we get stuck on the idea that we're supposed to do something, and sometimes we're just wrong about what we're supposed to do. So that's
right. Yeah.
So when you grew up in Mason, is it like a suburb? Is it a small town? What's it like?
Yeah, so it's about 20 miles from Cincinnati, north of Cincinnati. So it's a suburb. And when I lived there, I mean, if you go there now, it's the biggest school system in the state at this point. It's huge. But when we moved there in 1988, there was like a McDonald's and a Speedway at the exit. And now it's like everything. So it's really expanded. Procter & Gamble has a headquarters there that moved in about my senior year. So it kind of all blew up after I graduated. My parents still live there, but it's just totally a different place. It's kind of different to go home to now.
It's kind of a weird feeling, isn't it? Yeah.
It is.
I definitely know that feeling. I think where I grew up is different. Where my husband grew up is totally different. Is it sort of disappointing that you can't like just go and see what it used to be like?
A little bit, and I had a unique experience there. So my senior year, we went to the state championship for the first time for the girls basketball program. And it was a huge deal. The whole community rallied around it. And, they've had a couple teams go back since then. But it was such a really special time and special place. So when I go back, it's like I just want to keep it in a capsule. Like, you know what I mean? How it was for me. It's just, that's what it is. So I don't mix in too much, but like our 20-year reunion was fun, or things like that, or 10-year I guess is the one. But
well, and it's good to see a city doing well, right? Like it's doing well, but it's a little weird too. I don't know. I get that. So as a kid, were you just fascinated with basketball, or like was it only basketball? What was your thing as a kid?
I played volleyball and did track and played basketball. And really I got into it because my big brother played basketball, and that kind of got me intrigued. But I remember I wanted to start in sixth grade. Well, I knew that in fifth grade I wanted to play basketball, but there was no girls team. There was just a boys team for sixth graders. And so another girl and I were both determined we were just going to play for the boys team if there wasn't a girls team. And luckily, one of the parents of a girl in our class started a girls team. So it's kind of exciting for me. Like now, girls have these opportunities from being very young, but it was kind of just an interesting turning point for even girls in sports and the opportunities that we had. So it was kind of fun, but I kind of wish I could have taken on the boys. I took them on at recess all the time. Because I was taller than them. I'm 6 foot tall. You can't see that from where I am right now. But, I've been this height since like 7th or 8th grade. So I just was towering over everybody. All my childhood pictures. I'm like a giant in the picture. But
and did you always embrace your height? Like, because I have a daughter who's 6 feet tall. She's actually 5'11" and 3/4. Don't tell. But she's. Oh, you just went quiet on me, Kendra.
Oh,
which is good. You're back. But it was like silent when you admitted that you were maybe just a smidge. That's really funny, actually.
Don't get that on record.
Yeah, don't tell anyone. But no, she's always just been so into it. Like she's so happy. You always hear people sort of talk about like, oh, girls who are really tall are kind of shy. And I don't know, the tall girls I know are kind of into it, and they're proud of it, and they're, bragging, and they're measuring themselves next to the boys and saying, yeah, I still got 1.5 inches on you, Were you always like that? Were you into it?
Yeah, I was pretty much into it. I was, I just kind of embraced it, and it was what it was.
Beautiful. So, right. I mean, it's a lovely thing. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it. Right. And models are 6 feet tall, right? This is a good thing, but it's so funny because we're weird about those things sometimes, but maybe our generation's a little better about it. Maybe it's because we had more sports, honestly. Right. But so you were on the first girls basketball team at your middle school. You were on the first women's basketball team to go to state in high school. And then you were a 3-time All-American. So you're not very good at basketball, right? Is that what you're telling me? Like you're kind of terrible at this? Is this what's going on?
Well, if you ask my kids, they don't want me to teach them how to play basketball. They don't want to listen to me or have me coach them. So they don't want to play basketball. So I'm hoping my grandchildren are where I can really, hone in back on my basketball skills. So,
oh man, well, you just have to go volunteer somewhere to do it, and it'll have to be somebody else's kids, maybe.
Right. I know.
There'll be some.
I've coached my sons a little bit, and all in all, it's a good thing I don't coach anymore because my blood pressure probably couldn't handle it, or my vocal cords. I was too loud.
Well, sometimes, to put it nicely, right? Sometimes when you're really good at a sport and you win a lot, it can be harder to coach people from the beginning. Are you really patient? Are you able to do that?
I've become more patient. A good break from it makes me much better. And being a parent, because when I was coaching in college, I coached college, and, I was just fresh out of college. So I just didn't have any real perspective about these are someone's children, these are just like soldiers, but, I helped them and I had fun doing it, but it's been good. Yeah.
College sports are interesting too, because, kids who are in college think that they're adults. They're pretty sure, and I'm sure as a young coach, you're like, yeah, I'm coaching these adults. We're all going to be fine. But it's like, but they truly are. They're just somebody's kids. I remember watching a UT football game one time, and the kid missed the kick, right? He had a kick at the end, and if he had made the field goal, they were going to win, and he didn't. And then the game was over and he had failed. And all these people are kind of railing on, and I'm like, that's a 19-year-old kid. Like, what are you 50-year-old people doing, yelling about this kid? I don't know. I guess it's the mom in me, right? But that's all I see now.
Well, and it's true. So when we went to the state championship my senior year, we lost at the buzzer. And I was the one who took kind of a badly timed shot from the corner, way out of my range even, that missed, and they got the rebound and chucked it down court, and they hit a layup on the other end.
Oh, geez.
So that's been, it's been a real thing for me to have to come to grips with in my life. It felt like such a defining moment, and it's not, but it is, and it's learning to manage this big wave. And then I kind of lost my mind and, took this shot, and then it didn't go my way. But that doesn't make me a failure. It's right. Just, and the Lord's funny because now I live in Akron, Ohio, which is right up the road from Wadsworth, Ohio. And Wadsworth is the team that beat us at the buzzer. And my homeschool group meets there. I've had to go to a church council meeting there to try to get a facility. And I said, well, I played Mason High School, and they go, 1997. Girls basketball. I mean, they knew because it was a huge deal for their town. Oh. So I always laugh. I tell them, well, you all should put a statue of me in the middle of town because I'm the one who helped. I gave you that game.
That was the gift. That was the gift you gave them. You're welcome. You're welcome. Right there at the buzzer. Oh, man. But
so, yeah.
It's so awful, though, right? It's a lot of pressure on kids. It's a lot of excitement, but it's a lot of pressure. And then it's also you miss shots all the time and you make shots all the time. And then it's this one shot matters, which it doesn't really, because all the shots earlier in the game made the score that led up to that moment, right? The other shots you made mattered, but it's really, and I think especially when we're younger, it's hardest to see that. And it's
right.
Yeah, that's hard. But you continued, you went ahead and played in college. And when you went to college, were you recruited for basketball? Were you there on basketball scholarship, stuff like that?
Yeah, so I was recruited very heavily for Division I, different places, not the big schools, but good solid size Division I schools. And I actually thought I had decided where I wanted to go my senior year. I wanted to go to LaSalle University in Philadelphia. Yeah. And I had visited it in the summer with my mom, but I had never met the team. So I just really wanted to do that. So I had an official visit scheduled and was supposed to fly out on a Friday. And he had told me, the coach told me that he had offered it to me and to one other girl. And his way of handling it was whoever takes it first gets the scholarship. And she took her official visit the weekend before I did. So but I wasn't willing to just cold turkey say I want it because I just had not met the team. I just, for me, the people really matter. So I was waiting and he called. I got a call Friday when I got home from school and he told me she had taken it. So my flight got canceled. I didn't get to go do my official visit. And so then it was I had to resituate because I had made up my mind, pretty much.
Yeah.
And so then it was like, okay. So then I took another visit to another school on the East Coast and just didn't have a great experience, felt homesick, and that's just not my personality. So I just was like, well, this isn't where I'm supposed to be. So then my mom actually called up the two Lutheran colleges in Ohio, the Wittenberg and Capital.
Mom's like, let's get her into the Lutheran schools.
Yeah. She's like, why aren't you recruiting my daughter? And so Capital had won the national championship for Division III in 94 and 95, and I graduated in 97. So Dixie Jeffers is an amazing coach. She's retired now, but she was there. She's in the Hall of Fame, all these things. So I got to play for her, and really it was like a Division I experience, but at a Division III institution. So I just got to be more well-rounded with my time and still do all the things I wanted to do. And that's just me. Whatever I do, I kind of hyper focus into it, but I don't like to just do one thing. It's like, I like to be doing all kinds of things and working on my talents in different areas. So it was a perfect fit for me. Mm-hmm.
Well, and that's actually really good as a basketball player, because you're like one torn ACL away from losing it all, right? I mean, it's always sort of I've known so many kids who've gotten hurt and who were so excited, and it's like senior year and that's it. And then they have to figure something out new. So it's good that you had a few different things going. Was that a hard time though, when there's the state and then there's LaSalle, and were you just kind of feeling like, because when we're 17 or 18, it's really hard to have a lot of perspective on those things.
Yeah. Well, the Lord has just continued to humble me in my life. That's what as I look back, because, when I went into
tall, you're really talented. You've got to do something.
Because when I went into the whole search of colleges, because I played AAU ball, I did all that, I just was always playing ball. And so when I started my search and coaches were calling me and all of that, I just said to myself and told my parents and would tell coaches on the phone, I would say, I want to play Division I basketball outside of Ohio. Because in my mind, I thought that's how far I need to be from my parents. I need like a state border, even though I was from Cincinnati. Okay, what did that even mean? Kentucky?
Right.
I mean, what?
Literally
what are we talking
on
about?
The border.
Exactly. So like Dayton called me and I'm like, sorry, what's wrong with me? I don't know. I didn't know.
That's so common though. I know so many kids like that. And a lot of them end up going to school in state and they're really glad they did.
Well,
I've actually had a couple daughters in that exact spot.
Thank you. So Division I outside of Ohio, and what happened? Division III in Ohio.
Right.
So
exactly.
It's just like, be careful what you say out loud. It's just
yeah.
So my whole life story, I think, even as I speak it, it's like I've had to really learn how to be open and curious instead of just wanting to control everything that's going on.
Yeah.
It really needs to be, you got to see what's here. Don't go in with the plan,
That's right. It's hard to learn though for some of us. Like, when you're really good at things, you kind of like figure it out. You know what you want, you do it. You kind of just feel like it should all work because you're good at it. And it should, it is very stunning to learn those lessons over those early years as you start seeing it not work again and again.
Right. But, it's like there's one, I keep saying what I'm going to do and it's not working out that way. So I should maybe stop, being so hard-lined on it.
Yeah. I knew a very old Orthodox lady. She was like 105 and she was wonderful. And whenever you would tell her what you were going to do, like you say, on Tuesday, I'm going to come see you. And she'd go, I hope so. And it was just like, it was like this lesson she had learned in her 100 years. And eventually I got it. Right. But it took me a while. It took me a while to figure out why. She's really saying, God willing, don't make that plan, Fred,
Yeah.
But, okay. So you ended up in a Lutheran school. When you were growing up, did you love the church? Were you in youth groups? Were you really active? What was it like for you?
Yeah. We were a family that was there every Sunday. I loved youth group. I loved summer camp. When every summer it was my favorite, week of the year. In college, I worked at a Lutheran camp out in Idaho for a summer and loved doing that. 2 summers maybe. But I just really loved the Lord. Loved the church, really had no issue with being Lutheran, loved potlucks. I'm German, everything's fine.
That's awesome. So you settled, like, no big deal. I'll just be Lutheran. I'm going to raise up my Lutheran babies. And then, yeah. Okay. Yeah. So you had the plan again. You had the plan. You had it all figured out. All right. So, so when you finished college, I guess that you you weren't coaching right away, right? Because you went off to get the master's, or were you also coaching and working on the master's at the same time?
Yeah. So I was like a graduate assistant coach at University of Chicago while I was doing my master's. So I just worked with the team there, which was a really cool experience. But yeah, so yeah, really once I got into college, as I got older in college, my church going drifted away, and I just I didn't really get hooked into a church. I wasn't attending regularly. I just kind of got lazy, although I was studying religion. So I was a double major with English and religion, but the academic of religion isn't necessarily like your spiritual development.
It's right. It's not like you're praying through it. You're just reading.
Right. You're reading
and analyzing
all the things, and just kind of making it mean what I want it to mean, and that kind of thing as well. Yeah. And so then when I went to
very much. That's what I did in grad school as well, or graduate in college as well. I just made it mean what I wanted it to mean, and it worked.
Yeah. And initially in college, I thought I was going to be a secondary ed major, so I did that and English. But then my junior year, I dropped the education major, much to the chagrin of my mom, because it got really paperwork heavy, and they wanted me to write down objectives and how I was going to assess and how I was going to measure things. And I was like, no, I just want to talk. I just want to. Yeah.
And guess what? If you're teaching, it's going to be a lot of lesson plans and a lot of, like you said, it's all coming to you then. You're like, oh, okay.
Right. I just want to do it in my head and spew it. I don't want to write it all out for you. So I dropped that after talking to a professor who was like, oh, you should just be a college professor. It's a great life. You just do what you want to do. Exactly. I was like, that's who I need to be. So I applied and got into Chicago and went. Okay. So straight from college to University of Chicago Div School, which is an intimidating place. I remember the first day, the dean, sitting there and saying, I'm speaking to a room of the future scholars of religion. And I was like, looking around like, am I in the right place? I'm just here I just like studying religion and English, like stories, And so
I'm not planning to be the next famous theologian. I'm more like here for the basketball and the books.
Right. But it was a really cool, if you've ever been there, it's a beautiful campus, the buildings. I just felt like it was just amazing to be in the spaces there. So anyway.
It's one of those schools that's kind of Harry Potter. Like it's very
Yes.
beautiful.
Oh, very.
I was actually just there a couple weeks ago on campus.
Oh, nice.
And it was a perfect day. It was so beautiful. But usually it's really cold there. So it's not always so beautiful. But did you like Chicago? How'd you like living in the city?
So I did. I loved living down in Hyde Park, being so close to the lake and just being able to run to the lake, swim in the lake, like just such a fun place. And that is where I met my husband. So he and I actually met working at the Divinity School coffee shop in the basement of the Div School. So we had a Tuesday morning shift together, and just the two of us, and we became friends that way. I was actually dating someone at home. So there's like all these stories about how it all ended up working out. But by the time that my first year ended, we had started dating. But he's from Oklahoma. He was in the MDiv program, but was really in it more for like the social work aspect of it. There was a dual degree. So he got his MDiv, and that actually helped bring him to orthodoxy. But he's been a retail manager, most of his life till just now. He's starting a new job soon. So, but
it's really like you get the MDiv, you're kind of either pastoral or you're just doing something.
You're doing something different.
It doesn't leave like 15 different great options. It's sort of right. But that's interesting so when you were studying, you're Lutheran, you're studying in a Lutheran program. So I would assume that you were reading some of the fathers and it's liturgical. Right? So what was it like for you? You're in a different program than him. So, but for you, what was it like?
So the program at Chicago it wasn't a Lutheran program, right?
Oh, right.
Chicago, the Div School. Yeah. So the Div School, it's, I don't know, it's an interesting place, but it's
Christianity-wide sort of.
Yes, and very academic, and not even just Christianity. It's the Div School, right? So you've got all religions and all of these things going on. So, it was a real learning curve for me, even just to step up my academic game. It was just a lot more critical theory studying, I remember I kind of failed my first paper, which I didn't really know. It was a B-, and I was like, And the professor's like, can I speak to you after class? I'm like, sure. And he's like talking to me with this kind of grim face. And I'm like, it's a B-, man. Calm down.
I was like, no, this is graduate school. It's either an A or a B.
I know.
That's it.
He's
There's
like,
no fail.
He's like a C is, you're doing terrible. And I was like, oh my gosh. He's like, you can rewrite it if you want. I was like, oh, okay. But the good news is by the end of that first year, I kind of upped my game, figured it out. And I remember the TA from that class was grading the papers at the end of the year. And she told my roommate that my paper was the best she had read. So I was like, see, I can figure this out.
I have come back. That's awesome. That's awesome. But it's true. I mean, it's a different kind of writing. And I think it sort of makes sense that you would struggle on the first ones, but that's
right. And so that's a second lesson of my life is, be a beginner. When you're a beginner, allow yourself to be a beginner and don't freak out. Like you're going to probably be really bad at it.
Right.
Just keep working, and maybe it'll come around and maybe not. And then you'll just change gears and decide that's not for you. And that's also okay.
That's great. That is great. But so I was wondering with the div school, you didn't learn, and I guess also in undergrad learning religious studies and stuff, you didn't read stuff that made you think about orthodoxy or anything like that, right? You're just...
Yeah, no. So I really don't think I had heard of orthodoxy until I met my now husband.
Isn't that kind of amazing? Like the idea
really
that
amazing.
You could have studied religion in America for so long and nobody mentioned this other other thing.
This whole other thing
happening.
Yeah,
it is.
Yeah, it's
it's shocking, but it's also, figures, sounds about right.
Right.
Absolutely.
And then in my growing up as Lutheran, it's like, I really just knew that we weren't Catholic,
Right.
It was like, we're definitely not Catholic. We broke from Catholicism. And so that's really as far back as my memory, would hold.
Right.
So, yeah. But when I met my husband, he had joined an Orthodox church in Hammond, Indiana, a Greek church, St. Demetrius. And he ended up there as part of his internship for his MDiv. But he grew up Church of God out of Anderson, Indiana, but he was from Oklahoma, but that was just the Church of God that he grew up, which is kind of like Southern Baptist. But when he came to div school, he had gone to Calvin College for undergrad, so Christian Reformed type of school, and then he went to Chicago. His mom had died of Lou Gehrig's when he was in college. He had spent some time even at L'Abri in Switzerland, like Francis Schaeffer stuff. And then he ended up at the div school to kind of just keep studying and work out some more questions he had about life. And so he had to do an internship his third year, and he just knew that he did not want to do something similar to his upbringing because he felt like he would rebel from it. So he just wanted to check into something totally different. And he had learned about Orthodoxy through art history classes that he had taken in college and at grad school. So he called around different Archdiocese offices, and people really were kind of not wanting him to mix his personal search with his spiritual studying and his academic studying, all this. He kind of ran into some things, but he called the Greek office, and this great guy at the Greek office in Chicago was just kind of took him under his wing and said, we're going to find a place for you. So he put him out at St. Demetrius, and the priest there was a more academic type of priest, loved to study, had a PhD, that sort of thing. So he took him under his wing, and I just joked that he was like their pet there, like their little oaky pet, because everyone else there was Greek. So the first time I went there, I'm with him, and I'm like, never been in an Orthodox church, and I'm just taking it all in. And at one point he looks at me, he's like, because I'm like, can I sit down? And he's like, nobody else is sitting down. I'm like, oh, I'm just kind of like these beautiful old ladies are just standing there. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what are we doing?
Like, I'm only 23, but I'm not used to this.
Exactly. Can we move, do defensive slides, anything, but the standing. So anyway, we got out of there, and I was just like, well, that was really interesting, beautiful. I know what Greek people look like now, a whole room of them, never been there before. So that's great. But I was like, but you're not Greek and I'm not Greek. So what's going on, And for me, it was like, I believe the same things they do. Everything they said, I agree with. Why can't I take communion? All that kind of like wrestling. So anyway, we just went forward in our relationship. It felt perfect. Everything except our Christianity, our differences in our denominations kind of was the thing. But for me, remember, I had kind of fallen away from going to church, but him being Orthodox and me seeing that, I was like, well, my actually being Lutheran is important to me. And so I actually started attending a Lutheran church in grad school once I started dating him. And I was like, I like potlucks, and I'm German, and I'm Lutheran. Like, this is who I am. So I'm going to go to the Lutheran church and do my thing, and you should come see my thing, you know? And we were just kind of going back and forth a little bit. We even talked about, he's like, well, maybe we could work it out. You know, we'll just raise the kids. I don't know. I'll go take communion when I need it. And, you know, I mean, we were just young, trying to figure it out, right? Make it up.
Right.
But then we actually went to his cousin's wedding, who's not Orthodox, you know, it was in New York, Presbyterian or something. But all they talked about all weekend was how important Christ was to their relationship, and that was the foundation of their relationship. They wanted it to be the foundation of their home. And we were flying home from that, and I was like, look, this is what both of us want. We both want this to be the foundation. It's so important to both of us, but we're not, like, it can't be the foundation if we're both doing different things, you know? So we need to figure this out. And so we just decided we were going to start church shopping together. And so he looked up, he knew about All Saints on the north side of Chicago with Father Patrick Henry Bearden, which is a very convert-friendly parish, you know, always has been.
That's a great parish. And Father Patrick, he's awesome.
Yes. So we went there, and, you know, one of the first people that greeted me was like talking to me and asked if I was Orthodox. And I said, no, I'm Lutheran. And he was like, oh, I used to be a Lutheran pastor. And I was like, oh, my people, we're here. Everyone's here. And so, and there were lots of young couples who were engaged or dating and all inquiring about the Orthodox Church, who were from Wheaton College. And, you know, there were just all these people that were not, you know, cradle Orthodox. And it just felt like a place I could learn about Orthodoxy and figure it out. And I just liked the people. They invited us to breakfast after, you know, liturgy and things like that. So, so after that Sunday, my husband said, well, do you want to go to a Lutheran church next week and check a Lutheran church or something else? And I was like, oh, I want to go back there. That was really nice. And we never went anywhere else. We just kept going to All Saints, and that's where we were married, where I was chrismated, and had our first 2 children baptized, and it's really wonderful.
Oh, how beautiful. Mm-hmm. It is really remarkable how, you know, just a church can just feel right, and then it's easy from there. I mean, you know, how you can just be comfortable and it's easy. Well, we're going to take a very short break. We'll be right back with Kendra Hunter, and we'll be back on Everyday Orthodox. See you soon.
The Orthodox Christian tradition is filled with wisdom and guidance about the biblical path of salvation. Yet this guidance remains largely inaccessible to parents and often disconnected from the parenting challenges we face in our home. Parenting Toward the Kingdom, Orthodox Christian Principles of Child Rearing by Philip Mamalakis, Ph.D., will help you make the connections between the spiritual life as we understand it in the Orthodox Church and the ongoing challenges of raising children. It takes the best child development research and connects it with the timeless truths of our Christian faith to offer you real strategies for navigating the challenges of daily life. You can find this book and others like it at store.ancientfaith.com. Again, that is store.ancientfaith.com.
Welcome back to Everyday Orthodox. We're here tonight with Kendra Hunter. And, you may have just heard an ad for parenting. Is it Parenting Toward the Kingdom? I almost lost my preposition there for a second. Parenting Toward the Kingdom. And, of course, Kendra is part of the team that wrote the companion book to that beautiful volume. So we're going to talk about that in a few minutes. But also, so Kendra, okay. So you guys kind of you sort of found the right parish and it just was comfortable. And, it's interesting too, that the Greek parish was so nice and so welcoming, and that for your husband, it fit fine. But for you, you were kind of like, oh, I'm not Greek, and then it was so much easier. I think too, it's easier when everybody's your age. It's all these young couples and it's like, oh, I can see myself hanging out with them. I can see myself being part of this. So that's neat. So then how long was it before you guys were married? Like how long were you in the church before you got married? Or I guess how long, I don't know how to put that.
Yeah.
How long did you date too?
Right. So we dated maybe, 2.5 years-ish, 2 to 3 years, somewhere in there. But when we started going to All Saints, it was like within 6 months that we got engaged, or within a few months that we got engaged. And then it was like 6 months later we got married. So once we kind of landed there, we were ready. It was like the final piece. And that was hard for my parents because, or, you know, especially my mom, because it just kind of, all of it came kind of suddenly. Like they gave Brian their blessing, but then it was like, okay, we're getting married. And by the way, we've been going to an Orthodox church. And by the way, we're going to have an Orthodox wedding and I'm going to become Orthodox and then we're going to raise Orthodox babies. You know, it was like, and by the way, you can't have communion at our church. And, you know, It was like,
please come and visit, but don't do anything.
Don't be mad. Don't be mad.
It's hard for families. It's very hard to, you know, usually over time they see that you're happy and you're well and that you have a Christ-centered life and it all works out fine. Is that sort of, did your parents sort of feel that way eventually? Or is it still kind of weird for them?
Yeah, I mean, right. Maybe a little bit of both, but I think, but you know, their journey has also shifted. So it's just, you know, we're all just kind of figuring it out. And I think they did come to see, I mean, it was easier for my dad because he had been Episcopalian growing up and then he became Lutheran for my mom, you know, or to be in the same church with my mom.
Okay.
But, you know, like, I mean, my relatives, like my father's name or my grandfather's name is Luther and my uncle's name is Martin Luther. So it's like, we really were kind of Lutheran. You know what I mean? So,
yeah.
So there's like a family, there's like a family heritage. There's like all of that was wrapped up. And I think too, the suddenness of it for her was hard. Like, are you sure? Yeah. What, you know, we haven't even talked about this. And here I'm off in Chicago, you know, who knows what's getting in my head, you know, all of that kind of a thing as a mom, which now I can understand. Like, hey, what's going on out there? What are they telling you out there?
Right. Are you making lifelong decisions based on like, how long you've been at that church? What are you talking about?
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
it's a lot. It's a lot. So the two of you got married at All Saints. Mm-hmm. Were you there? Yeah. And then how long before you started having kids?
I think we were married. It took 3 years before we had our first son. And then we waited 3 more years or we had 3 more years before there was our second child, who's a girl. And then it was like every 20 months we had, you know, 2 more. And I was working, coaching when I got pregnant, the first time and stopped working, once he was born. And then I was off for a year, but the school I was at actually called me and asked if I would be the head coach. I had been an assistant coach and I had been an assistant athletic director, and then they needed a head coach and they just kind of were like, we could work with you. We could figure this out. And I was like, okay. So I did that for 2 years. But then once I had my daughter, I just said, nope, I really want to be home. I feel ready to be home. And after that, we moved to, we wanted to get back to family. So my parents, like I said, were still in Cincinnati or Mason area. So we moved there for 6 months while we were figuring it out. But then my husband got transferred to Louisville, Kentucky. So we were in Kentucky 10 years at St. Michael's in Louisville, and then just moved to Akron almost 3.5 years ago now. So yeah, and then we had 2 more children. So we have a total of 4. They're 10 to 17 now. But we were in Louisville when I was working on the project with Dr. Mamalakis and the other ladies.
Oh, okay.
But it's funny. Yeah. But it's funny because Christina Tartera and I, now we live by each other. Like our girls play with each other, and you know, we didn't know each other in person.
Nice. Yeah. Nice if you had lived right there when you were working on this together. That would have been awesome.
Yeah. That would have been cool.
Well, so you said that I know that you have a business. What kind of a business is it, and when did you start it?
Sure. So I've been open for a year now, but I own my own franchise called House of Color. It does personal color analysis is what I do for people. So if you've ever heard people call themselves an autumn or a spring or a winter, like what colors they look best in. So I help, I do color analysis and also style analysis. And the irony is that I got into this really when my daughter was born 14 years ago. I just really felt ill-equipped to have a daughter. Like I didn't know how to be very feminine. I didn't really feel like I could be a model of like femininity to her or help her be feminine. And so I actually just Googled how to be girly one day, and the book Color Me Beautiful, yeah, the book Color Me Beautiful popped up from the 70s, and I went to the library and got it and read it like a good student, and kind of figured myself out, started to put it on different colors, and I was like, this is so good. I feel so much better. And so then I would tell everybody about it, and then about 2 years ago, I decided I was starting to look for something I could do work-wise, because I just felt like my kids, I'm starting to see the end of homeschooling. Like it's out there getting closer. They're older. They can do their own work a lot of times. I could be doing something else, and with all my energy. So I discovered House of Color has franchises, and we have this perfect room in the back of our home where I can do it. And so I'm still home and I can make my schedule as I want to. And it's been such a blessing. So
that is great. Well, and you're bringing sort of confidence and joy to people. Like that's actually really neat. You know, like you don't necessarily think of it as a service exactly, but it really, you know, if somebody's feeling kind of like, like they don't look so great and they're kind of low on themselves, what a great thing for them to come to you and get perked up.
Yeah, it's like a therapy office in here sometimes, but it's amazing. It really is. And it's really what I love about it is we are all created in the image of God. And when we put things around us that we harmonize with, when things are in harmony, the colors we're wearing, the style we have on, like the beauty just shines forth. It takes no effort. It's so easy to see beauty when there's harmony. And I think that's even true like in life, when you get in harmony with what you're supposed to be doing, or where, you know, when things are in harmony, it just makes things easier and more beautiful. So.
Well, you think about Pascha, right? Nobody ever looks bad on Pascha. Everybody's just filled with joy and happy, and we all love each other, and it's all just everything's great, right? Everything's in harmony. It's very true. That's very true. Well, so how did you end up getting involved then in this project with Dr. Mamalakis? Because you're not like doing child psychology, you're not like writing books. What were you doing that suddenly they're like, you know, who needs to be in this is Kendra Hunter?
Right. Exactly. That's a real great question. So, I
mean, I'm not saying you're the wrong person for the job. Don't get me wrong. No, I agree. You're great. So I'm just saying it's just funny because like, how'd they know you?
Yeah. So I was being very Kendra in my parenting style, thinking I knew how to do it. Right. Or I didn't, but I could read about it. I could learn how to be a good parent, and every problem that came up, I could figure out a solution for, you know, fix it.
It's kind of like a grad school illness or something, right? Like you go to graduate school and you're like, yeah, there's a book for things. And then you start having babies. You're like, oh, I'm going to need the book on that.
That's right. Marriage, need a book. Kids need a book. I'm just going to keep studying, you know.
It's just a matter of finding the right book. I got
That's right. And so I was doing that. I was struggling in my parenting. And so I found, you know, Parenting Toward the Kingdom came out. I got it right away. I read it and I was like, oh, we got to do this like as a book group at church. Like all the parents need to read this. We need to do this. Because if I find something I like, everybody else has to do it. That's how it is with the color stuff. It's like, I'm just going to get everybody to do it. So we had this opportunity at St. Michael's where we would do these Wednesday evening family nights. And so I suggested to the priest or whoever was in charge, I said, could I just lead this parenting group and we'll read through this book? And they're like, oh, that seems great. So I'm like preparing and figuring it out. And you know, there's so much information in this book, you know, and it can be really hard to decipher if you're leading a group. Like, what do I leave? There's too much. I don't want to leave anything out, but like, how do I get through this material? So I ended up just emailing Dr. Mamalakis out of the blue. I found his email, you know, online or whatever. And I just said, hi, I'm leading this parenting group. Do you have like some discussion questions you've used at retreats or like anything I could use to help, you know, or is there a companion guide, anything like that? And he wrote me back and said, no, I don't have anything like that, but I get this question a lot. He's like, if you are willing to kind of share with me what you're doing, I would be willing to give you feedback. And then just all I ask is you keep your notes, because I would maybe like to turn this into a project at some point. So if you're willing to do that, then, you know, who knows what'll happen, but let's just start here, you know? So that's what we did. I would send him my weekly activity I planned and things, all my little homeschool mom way I am, and so I was writing down plans. Okay, Elisa, I was writing down the plan.
Look at you.
All right.
Well, he made you do it too. If he hadn't made you do it, you would have gone just right off the top of your head.
That is so true. That is
It's good when somebody makes you write it down. It's like, oh, look, now this is like an asset that can be utilized in the future.
Exactly.
Amazing.
Someone else could do this. It doesn't have to be the Kendra show.
Can you imagine, like, being able to sit down and let somebody else do it? My goodness.
Right. Exactly. So
no, I can't relate to that at all. No idea what you're talking about. No idea at all.
So we just ended up corresponding, and he would do that every time, once a month it was or something. And so that just became, eventually, I don't even remember the timeline, maybe a year later, maybe 6 months later, he reached out and was like, hey, you still got those notes? Because I would like to do this. I've met 2 other women who've done something similar. Well, Christy had been doing it at her church, and then he knew Stephanie Patrides very, very well, and knew she was also interested in doing that sort of thing. So he just kind of gathered us together. COVID hit. We kind of worked through COVID, and it was a lot of Zooms. And it took us several years through Zooming together with our busy lives and our busy schedules. We would write things in between. We each had a different kind of skill set and would contribute. But we would converse every time with him on the calls, and we would just put these sessions together and work through kind of how to make it flexible, but also usable for people, because we really just understood that parents really need time to get together and kind of not just complain about parenting, but like learn about it, but in an environment where you can share your challenges and really your frustrations and your just feelings of overwhelm. Yeah. I was doing this work and reading this book as we went through it. It really helped me see that like even some of the strategies in the book weren't quite enough for me, and for our kids. Like, we have some special cases, and highly sensitive children, with dyslexia, with ADHD, with things that just kind of were really coming out in some really big meltdowns and big things that were really hard. And I didn't know how to drive the bus. I drove the bus like a coach, like I thought I would what I thought was the only way to control the reins was not working. And so my husband and I did a parenting kind of boot camp for highly sensitive kids as a side to this. So it was like another thing that we did. But I just really feel it just helped me really feel for parents, and for children, because it's like I said, my kids, it's a loving home I'm a stay-at-home mom. I'm homeschooling them. They're with me all the time. And it was like meltdown city. And I'm like, we don't live, this isn't a war zone, but it feels like it. Why are we in a war zone? But I've had to do a lot of work on my own self, and my own emotional intelligence and my own, all of that. So it's just, but again, it took me time because I'm a slow learner. I needed to be a beginner.
I think it's so hard, right? Because what is really, like you said, you knew what you would want in their place, like how you wanted to be parented. And I think we do, right? We see our parents and we're like, okay, you did pretty well, but what I really wanted was this and this. And then we just think we're going to go deliver that to our kids and it's going to be a big win. And it's like, no, each of them has different needs and each of them has different feelings on what would have been, I feel like when you talk to someone who, sometimes people don't want to say, oh, I had a problem with my parents or with the way that I was brought up because they feel like it's a criticism of their parents. And it's like, guess what? There's never going to be a perfect fit, what your parents' weaknesses and strengths are doesn't really necessarily match what the kids are. So there's just a lot of patience and compassion and things like this book, reaching out and trying to find these things. But I love that you've designed it for groups, because I think you're right. I think parents need to get together and not just complain, right? Because we do that, right? Like, as women certainly, and I think men do it too. We'll get together and it'll be like, oh, my husband this and my kid that. No, it's just awful. It's like, that doesn't help. That doesn't make anything better. It doesn't make you closer to each other. But when you go through something like this, you might learn something and be a better parent or a better wife. But also you develop these beautiful friendships in the parish. And that's such a blessing. That's such a good thing, because then you develop lifelong friendships. And that maybe is even more of a blessing, in some ways.
Yeah, and just being able to touch base with people and say, hey, how's it going? How did it go this week when you tried that with the kids? You know, did it work for you? We tried it, it didn't work, you know, something like that. Or this, it did work. This is how it went. And just like learning from each other. And even just, you know, a husband and a wife having an ability to kind of write in the book or talk back and forth. Because, you know, the husband has an assumption and the wife has an assumption. They were raised differently. And to not communicate on that, you know, can really cause a lot of issues. Or maybe it's a grandparent and a parent, you know, the grandparent's watching, babysitting all day, helping you out, but doing it totally different than you want to do it, or, you know, whatever the case. But having everyone who's kind of parenting the children on the same page and learning together and sharing what their ideas are, you know, is so helpful. So
what a great thought. I hadn't thought about that, but yeah, for people with grandparents or aunts and uncles, people who are very involved, to get them into that conversation and to everybody be thinking about it the same way. How beautiful.
Yeah. Because we really have to reframe our mindsets, because our kids are growing up in a different world than what we grew up in, than what our parents grew up in. And it's, you know, not that we have to change everything about parenting, but we do have to be aware of what they're experiencing as human beings growing up in today's world. And
I'm sure there have always been like generation gaps, but over this past century, like our culture changes so much every 10 years. Like we look at decades and we think of every decade as being totally different from the decade before that. That can't be right. Like that can't be normal. Like, this is crazy. It's nuts how things shift so quickly. And you're right. I think our parents and our kids and us, these are like three different experiences in three different cultures.
Yes.
That's neat. So when you were doing the companion guide, do you feel like all of you were able to maybe even add in more material that wasn't in the book, that like not just going through questions to help you think about the book, but even adding in things about like highly sensitive children or ADHD or other sorts of challenges that might not have been covered in the book?
We didn't get to go super in depth. You know, Dr. Mamalakis would say, he'd be like, oh, we need to write a chapter on that, or we need to, you know, do something with that. We put a little excerpt in there, like if this is something you're struggling with, you know, seek help from people who are experts in those fields, or, you know, talk to other parents who are managing that. So we kind of alluded to it that way, but there just really wasn't room to kind of, there was already so much in the book, you know.
Well, and it's not, he's probably right. It needs to be another book.
Yes, it needs to be another book. Right. And it's not that this parenting method doesn't work, but for people who have those situations, but you know, it's, sometimes it just needs a little bit more nuanced approach.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, or you might, you know, you might work differently, or you might see the results happen in a different order, in a different way. And you never know. But yeah, it's nice even just to have a flag there, like, hey, by the way, if this is your challenge, this might not look the same for you. So just be aware. Be aware yours looks a little different.
Right.
But, that's neat. That's really neat. That is great. So when did you guys finish doing this then?
So we've tried to figure that out, and I'm sure we did, but it was like a couple years ago that we finished. So it sat dormant, you know, and Dr. Mamalakis was finishing some edits on it or whatever, and it just sat, and we weren't really sure what would happen. People would say, oh, is that book going to happen? I'm like, I don't really know. It's in the Lord's timing. You know, we're just, we don't know. And, but it came up, and Ancient Faith was going to publish it, and I was like, oh, we're back here. This is happening. This is going to happen. This is amazing. So it's interesting because it's like I had younger kids when we were doing all that, and I was like in a different place, you know. So now I don't know. It's kind of a blessing, I think, because I do have different perspective. So even it's kind of like being a coach right after college, and then now being a coach, I would coach totally different. So it's like I have a better perspective. I have more wisdom now. Not that people are coming to me as an expert on parenting, but I'm just saying, you know, it's like, but if they do, or if I want to lead a retreat with this or something, it's like, you know, I feel like I have more wisdom. I'm in a different place, and I'm learning, you know, different layers of parenting. But I do think it's a wonderful, wonderful resource for parishes. And what we really felt like was some people are natural leaders, right? And there's some parishes that have a bunch of those, or have one that's just going to run all the things and lead all the groups. But a lot of parishes don't have that. And so we really wanted it to be something that felt doable for anybody, whether they're shy, whether they're, you know, someone who just wants some friends and can just say, ask the priest, hey, could I lead this thing, and put it in the bulletin and see who shows up. Even if it's just one other mom who comes or one other couple, it could be really special and just help you work through some things, because parenting isn't meant to be done alone. Doing it in community, and nothing in the church is meant to be done alone. And I just think a lot of us, I didn't live around my family, my, extended relatives. So I didn't have a lot of help. I was doing all this, and I'd lean on godparents, I'd lean on friends, but it really is a lot. And I think there's a lot of people doing that. And so any way you can create community is important. And this can just be one resource for that.
I think so too. Well, and I think too that, there are a lot of people who want to start groups and do different things like that, but they're not necessarily like, they don't maybe know a lot about parenting, but like they don't, right. They're like, I'm struggling. I need somebody to join us, but also I don't know what to say. And it's not like there's a parenting expert in every parish who's going to be leading classes, right?
Exactly.
So what a joy, and how neat to have something that's really Orthodox, because it's not like, oh, Orthodox kids have to be raised differently than other kids, really. But there is a way that, like, there's always a philosophy behind a parenting book, right? And like what it is to be a real human being, what it is to be a full human, what the human experience should look like. And this book really comes from a really intelligent, beautiful, Orthodox perspective of what it means to be a person, what it means to be human.
Yeah. And all the parts about confession and repentance and all of that, like that is as parents, what do we do more than ask for forgiveness and repent of how we've, made a mistake and have to repair that relationship? That happens over and over again. And the more we can model that to our children, it just prepares them for adulthood, and just being human,
Well, it's we're
expected to make mistakes,
Yeah.
Expected to make mistakes.
Because a lot of people think they are not supposed to admit mistakes to their kids, because they think that their authority is grounded in the fact that they do everything correctly. And so then it's like, well, I can't admit that it was right. And it's like, no. Like, actually, it's such a lovely thing, because Dr. Mamalakis' book talks about that, and about this sense that, repentance that's life, right? Fall down and get up, fall down and get up. It's a very Orthodox perspective.
Right. Because the more we put out that it's supposed to be perfect. I definitely grew up with that feeling, like I'm supposed to be perfect. And confession is really hard for me. It's really hard for me to see my faults and then admit them and say them out loud and not feel like the burden of them. I remember Father Patrick one time in confession, he said, Kendra, confession isn't a progress report. Because I was like, okay, I've been getting better at whatever that thing was,
I know. I do that too. I'll be like, Father, I can't believe I'm not better at this yet. I keep confessing it. And he's like, yeah, that's because it's like your weakness. Like, oh.
But I don't like to have a weakness, I'm not supposed to have any weaknesses, It's like, oh no. That the more we see them and just embrace them, and they takes the edge off of them, but then that's where you can relax and actually work on them. Right. I think that is true with parenting. It's like this child who's having all these meltdowns, all this stuff. It's like, I'm all revved up to try to stop it, end it. Right. If I could just stop the thing, we can calm down. But it actually just, that tension just holds, there's nowhere for it to go except inside of them, or big explosions. Right. Yeah. So, I just had to learn, like, okay, we're going to let this thing be here. It's going to get real big for a minute, and hopefully it'll go away if we just write it out a little bit, keep it safe. And then later we can talk when we're nice and calm and we're not so stressed about it.
That's a huge lesson. It's hard to learn. It is really hard to learn.
To manage discomfort, it's like, it's uncomfortable to have people be uncomfortable around you. And
it's true.
What's toddlerhood but discomfort full time, 24/7,
And middle school as well. I would like to.
Yes, middle school.
Also middle school. But I love that you guys put this together. So it's just called The Companion Guide to Parenting with the Kingdom.
Right.
And it's sold, I assume, at Ancient Faith store, store.ancientfaith.com.
Yep, it sure is. And you can get it as a bundle. So it makes a great gift for new moms, new parents, as a gift for a baby shower or something like that, if you want to get them both. But if you already own Parenting Toward the Kingdom, you can just pick this up. Also, if you don't have time to read Parenting Toward the Kingdom, Dr. Mamalakis does put an individual letter at the beginning of each section here. So he says it's best to read the book, but if you can't, there's excerpts.
Here's a cheat sheet.
That's right. This is like Cliff's Notes,
Perfect.
But
for busy moms, sometimes that is needed.
Right.
Or if you're in crisis, absolutely. Well, Kendra, that's awesome. I love this. I love the book. And I encourage all of our listeners, run out, start a parenting group, pick some copies up and go for it, because it's going to be a blessing in your life and in your parish life. Well, Kendra, thank you so much for being on the program.
Yeah, it was so fun talking with you. Thank you.
And thank you to our audience for joining us. And we'll see you next Sunday night with another Everyday Orthodox Christian. See you then.